Picture a dinner table. Everyone's laughing, food's going cold, and one by one, people start disappearing into their phones. Not physically, but you know that look. Eyes down, thumbs moving, present in body, somewhere else entirely. But there's one person still at the table, still in the conversation, not reaching for anything. And at some point, someone turns to them. Wait, you're not on anything? No Instagram, no TikTok, nothing? Like they just admitted they don't believe in Wi Fi. But here's what I want you to think about. What if that person isn't behind? What if they figured something out that the rest of the table is still too distracted to notice? Be honest. When did having a social media profile stop being a choice and start feeling like a requirement? Because somewhere along the way, the expectation shifted. You're supposed to have a presence, a following, a grid that tells people who you are before you even open your mouth. And if you don't, people get uncomfortable, confused. They ask questions like you owe them an explanation for how you choose to spend your own time, but quietly, and it doesn't make the news. More people are logging off. Not dramatically, no farewell post, no announcement, just gone. And when you actually study what happens to them psychologically after they leave, the findings don't match the story we've been told about what we'd be missing. These aren't isolated people. They're not broken or behind. In a lot of cases, they're some of the most grounded, self-aware people you'll ever sit across from. So the question is, what do they know that you don't? You open the app. Just for a second. 2 minutes later, you're staring at someone's kitchen renovation, wondering why your life feels so unfinished. You felt that, right? That weird low-grade deflation after scrolling, like you were fine before you opened it? That's not a coincidence. And it's not weakness. Your brain is running a very old program. Humans are wired for social comparison. It helped our ancestors figure out where they stood, who to trust, how to survive. That instinct kept people alive for thousands of years. The problem? That instinct was built for a village of maybe 150 people, not 500 curated profiles, all showing their best angles, all at the same time. Your brain can't tell the difference between someone's real life and their highlight reel. It just sees the gap and registers it as a threat. Psychologists call this upward social comparison, and research keeps confirming the same thing. It's directly tied to anxiety, lower self-worth, and that creeping feeling that everyone else is somehow ahead of you. People who don't use social media haven't eliminated that instinct. They've just stopped feeding it daily, and over time, that changes things. Think about this for a second. Why does the app feel so hard to close? It's not your fault. That's not self-help talk. It's engineering. The infinite scroll, the notification that arrives just when you were about to put your phone down, the way likes don't all appear at once. These aren't accidents. They're decisions, tested, refined, and deployed specifically to keep you inside the app as long as possible. Former engineers from the biggest platforms have said this publicly. You're not the customer. You're the product. Your attention is what gets packaged and sold. And you're paying for it with something you can never get back. People who step away from social media have, consciously or not, pulled their attention back. And when that low-level urgency, the pull to check, post, react, finally quiets down, what replaces it is an emptiness. It's something most of us have almost forgotten how to feel. Uninterrupted thought, the kind where you actually finish an idea. Here's what the research shows, and it's more consistent than you'd expect. When people significantly cut or eliminate social media, attention improves. Not overnight, gradually. The way your lungs feel different weeks after you stop a bad habit. You start noticing you can hold a thought longer. That boredom, which used to send your hand straight to your pocket, becomes something you can actually sit with. When was the last time you were bored? Genuinely bored, without immediately reaching for your phone? Because inside that boredom, things start to surface. Ideas you forgot you had. Questions you've been too distracted to ask. A quieter version of yourself you haven't heard from in a while. Studies on people who quit social media entirely, not reduced, quit, showed meaningful reductions in anxiety and depressive symptoms, particularly in younger adults. Cutting back helped, stopping changed things. There's a difference between turning the volume down and turning it off. People who don't use social media aren't just a little less stimulated, they're living in a fundamentally different environment. Be honest. Have you ever not posted something because of how it might look? Not because it wasn't true, not because it wasn't real, just because you weren't sure how it would land, what people would think, whether it was the right version of you to put out there. That's not vanity. That's what happens when you have an audience. You start editing yourself for them slowly, unconsciously, until the version of you that exists online and the version of you that exists privately start to drift apart. Psychologists call it public self consciousness, the ongoing background awareness of how you appear. At low levels, it's normal. But when you're managing a public image daily, it becomes noise you can never fully switch off. You're never fully off stage, and performing takes energy, even when you don't notice you're doing it. People who've never had that audience don't have that noise. They're not managing a personal brand, they're just living. And there's a psychological settledness in that, a groundedness that's hard to manufacture once you've spent years performing yourself online. They know who they are because they've never had to explain it to strangers. Let's be fair, not everyone who avoids social media has it figured out. Some people stay off it out of anxiety, fear of being judged, or something quieter, fear of being ignored, which sometimes feels worse than criticism. That's not freedom. That's avoidance dressed up as a philosophy. There's a real difference. Are you off social media because it doesn't serve you, or because you're not sure you could handle it if it did? One is a choice made from security. The other is a retreat made from fear. The psychology only gets interesting with the first group. People who looked at the whole thing clearly, understood what it was doing, and decided it wasn't worth the trade. That's a different person entirely. And here's something that sounds counterintuitive, but keeps showing up in the research. People who don't use social media tend to have fewer friends, and they're happier for it. Think about your own friends list for a second. How many of those people would notice if something was genuinely wrong with you? Social media flattened friendship. Your closest person and someone you met once at a work event exist at the same social distance in your feed. Everyone becomes background. Nobody becomes closer. People who aren't on social media don't have that problem. They have people they actually call, people who know their moods, people who show up. They didn't confuse connection with content, and that's a harder mistake to avoid than it sounds. Research on happiness, longevity, mental health, it consistently points to the same variable. Not how many people you know, how deeply a few of them actually know you. Here's what we've quietly accepted without ever deciding to. That visibility equals value. That if you're not posting, you're not participating. That a life that isn't documented is somehow less real. But who decided that? And when did you agree to it? Because there are people walking around right now, fully alive, genuinely connected, actually content, who have never posted a thing. No profile, no following, no brand. And the science, quietly, keeps pointing in their direction. Not because social media is purely evil. Tools aren't evil, but every tool asks something of you in return. And the question worth sitting with is, what is this one asking for? And is what you're getting back actually worth it? The version of you that exists without an audience is the version you actually get to keep. People who don't use social media aren't rejecting connection. They're rejecting the terms. They're saying, I'll be present, I'll be real, but I won't perform it for people who aren't actually in my life. And in a world that profits from your self-doubt, that quiet refusal is more radical than it looks. I'm not telling you to delete your apps. That's not the point. The point is just this one question. And I want you to actually answer it, not just let it pass. Is the life you're building online the life you actually want to be living? Because the people who don't use social media answered that question honestly, and then they did something about it. You don't have to do the same thing they did, but knowing the answer, that's worth something.